an object into space and is going to explore Mars. Even now, they are in Martian space. Ghana certainly can compare itself to United Arab Emirates, if even we are not as wealthy as they are, at least population-wise, land size and whatnot. So we should be very interested. But we can also do that in collaboration with our neighbors. That is why Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, we can get our act together. And in collaboration, we can get some of these things going. So yes, as a minister, I will explore these possibilities. And if there is a niche area that Ghana can express itself, we shall do that.
Okay, I have a specific question. Do we have a space policy?
Yes, there are rudiments, no rudiments. I know that there are space policy, but it is within the confines of MESTI. So we will have to. The draft policies are there.
Is there a roadmap to ensure that we and our partners are in space at some point? And if so, what is that point?
Mr. Speaker, I did not get the last one. Mr. Chairman.
Is there a roadmap to get us into space at some point? And if so, what is that point?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of that. I have to find out. It's not everything. I'm going there, and let me confess that it's not everything that I have come to. There could be, but honestly, I do not know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm most grateful, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to take the nominee to COVID-19 response and how, like no other time, COVID has reminded us that science, research and development must lead, and we must invest massively. Clearly, countries that invested in R&D are doing better in developing a vaccine and having the facilities, the testing kits and all of that, the basic infrastructure to fight the pandemic. We have still not met the AU target of 1% of GDP for research and development. How can you take advantage of the times we are in and scale up support, not only government resource allocation, but also mobilizing resources from non-state actors so that as a country we can begin to invest more aggressively in research and development, meet the 1% target of GDP, which has eluded us for years now, and build a strong capacity to be led by science.
Mr. Chairman, the need for a very robust research and development system is so self-evident that I believe that the advocacy for it will register on the Ghanaian public. The question is funding, and like the Honorable Committee member said, I am aware, or like he has availed my mind to the fact that under Lagos protocols, government should at least set aside 1% of their GDP per annum to do research and R&D activities. So, and indeed, my predecessor has brought I'm aware that we sent to Cabinet a document which has been approved that at least 1% of our annual budget, our GDP, should be spent in the R&D sector. When I go, I'll find out whether, if it needs legislative backing, then I intend bringing it as fast as possible to this House so that it has a legal backing. In fact, I prefer that option because it will then uplift all government and we will all sign to it. Either government will succeed itself or a different government succeeding a different government. So that should be one of my mandates. So a beginning has been made and I've cited detailed proposal in the policy document and so we have to find out whether there are elements of legislation that have been made. If that has, then I will speed it up and bring it, send it to Cabinet and then bring it to this. Now, of course, that decision will have to be made by the President in consultation. And if it's going to be done by an executive fiat too, then it means that the pathway then will be very short indeed. Then I have to prevail on my superiors because we are running a 4-year, electoral cycle. It's done as soon as possible. But more importantly, this one, the sustainability question will come in when industry itself appreciates the importance of R&D. And in that one, I have made several references to it, even in questions that have been asked before. So the private sector will have to be brought on board through several regimes. I noticed that, Mr. Chairman, that even 1% is on the low side because places like South Korea and elsewhere, they are doing 2% or 1.5% of their GDP. But that is another matter. Even 1%, they haven't reached it. So we take that first step and I'll make the advocacy for it to be above even what the Lagos Protocol recommended. Thank you.
Related to that, Mr. Chairman, is the amazing innovations that have come up during this COVID era in Ghana, local innovation. I have a few listed here. KNUST and Incas Diagnostics, they have developed rapid test kits waiting for FDA approval. You have the Redbird Health Tech Company that has developed a sophisticated diagnosing app. You have Professor Fred Bagonlori and his students at Academic City College who have developed an affordable ventilator. You have Team Marvel that won an award, Patience Norte, Nelly Apete and Ishmael Asari for developing ventilators. You have Dr. Emmeline Opoku, who also has developed a diagnosis mobile app for health workers. You have Cognate Systems that has also developed a special health assistance app. And the list goes on and on and on. But you talk to all of these innovators and they say that they are not receiving support. If approved, how can you reach out to these amazing innovations that have come up in these times so that you can give them the needed government backing by way of policy, by way of resources, to have it commercialized? Because it will not only help us in developing our scientific capacity, it also has industrial and job creation opportunities. How can you assure this committee that you will reach out to all of these local innovators who are winning international awards, making waves, but don't seem to be getting the needed governmental support?
Mr. Chairman, innovations engendered by COVID, many in the African continent, so many everywhere. And Ghana is no exception. The examples that we have cited exist. Yes, but there are problems with applicability. So, specifically, what I intend to do is to have a team, scientists who will evaluate the applicability of these innovations. Because we have to get a certain criteria that these innovations will satisfy so that they can be helped. Because our bottom line is that there should also be an economic criteria. Because if the innovation does not bring economic benefits, then in essence it belongs to the basics. It means this thing is possible. But if you are talking, you have to look at applicability. Then the other aspect of it, of these innovations and diagnostics, or technical innovations in terms of equipment and then diagnosis, is that intellectual property protection is very, very weak in this country. So we have to up it and look at that regime so that anybody who brings an idea to the fore, his intellectual property is not stolen. If you do not do that, people might not bring to warrant. In fact, it's a big moral and ethical issue, so we have to look at, especially when I'm thinking of calling for a decade of innovation in this country. So thank you, it has brought to the fore, but certainly in a very small way, COVID, that one, you do not, COVID does not, the routine laws and routine regimes, COVID, you wave them aside. So we will have a small team to look at them, and those that have potential, by all means, we look at those things and make sure that they are applicable in the Ghanaian situation.
Finally, Mr. Chairman, I want to pick the nominees' thoughts on climate change. Yesterday, the United States returned to the Paris Climate Change Accord under President Biden. The climate change debate, there are those who belong to the developing countries school of thought who say that we have to be measured with our targets and how we pursue climate change goals, because our developed counterparts did not have these climate change limitations and allowed them to industrialize, and they are now at a particular pedestal, and that we should be mindful how we follow them at this point in our development. Where do you stand? Are you with those who are a bit more skeptical and say that let's develop first and be a bit mindful about the climate change research outcomes, or you think that we should leapfrog and we should confront the reality of climate change and go along with the developed world and be more aggressive at adapting to the climate change threat? I want to know where you stand in this debate and where we can expect you as the policy leader on this matter, if nominated, which direction you will move this country.
Mr. Chairman, implicit in the question is the idea that this climate change issue is a binary issue. It is not. A whole lot of conversation and science is in there, built through the millennia. Those have developed. Those countries, yes, they had a free ride and used their world resources to get to where they are. And we are here. And they are telling us that, in fact, tropical world is the lungs of the world. So we should be the carbon sinks that takes in the CO2 and all that. I understand all those issues. But whether we like it or not, they have leapfrogged us, and indeed, they are still spewing out those gases that is even as we speak, making that climate, aggravating the climate. So I'm very happy that President Biden has returned the US of A to the Paris Accord, because they were one of the key abusers of the planet. That said, as a minister and Ghana being a small country, I believe that whether we like it or not, climate change is real. And there's a limit to what we can do. That is why in one of the questions that we should develop climate smart systems so that we can survive as a nation. But more importantly, we demand from those countries as of right that they should do environmental restitution. And if Ghana, Nigeria, DRC and whatnot, we are the carbon sinks of this world, the lungs of this world, then we should receive recompense for that. It doesn't have to come in the form of money. It can be technological assistance to beat this same climate change and to assist it. And this thing can be costly. And in fact, they have a moral obligation to do that. So that is my take on that. It's not a binary issue. You cannot say that I'm for them or against them. Thank you, sir.
Very well. Okay. Eric is not ready. Yes, Honorable. Honorable nominee, you have already spoken about plastic waste management, but I'd like to find out from you, given the fact that plastic is a persistent pollutant which poses grave danger to our soil. A Greek, when ruminants feed on plastic, they die. I'd like to know from you whether you would not consider an outright ban on plastic, the importation, manufacture, and distribution of plastic, like the Rwandans have done. Today, if you go to Rwanda, it's one of the cleanest cities because they have banned the distribution, manufacture, and importation of plastic.
Mr. Chairman, ban plastics or not? That's a very difficult one. As a new minister entering the scientific arena, I have to immerse myself and listen to all the conversation and the arguments and whatnot, the scientific basis, the data, and the economic basis pertaining to our situation before one makes such pronouncements. What I know is that we can certainly lessen our dependency on plastics, and certain steps have been taken. We can also do recycling and all that. But whilst we are at it, we will have to monitor what other countries have done, and their situation if they have lessons for us that we can copy. After all, we are living in an interdependent world. Then we may want to consider what they've done and see whether we can do. But for now, I do not have all the information that is available to make such a categorical pronouncement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman.
My second question has to do with desertification. Ghana ratified the United Nations Convention to combat desertification in 1996. But ever since we signed and ratified that convention, it appears not much has been achieved in our collective quest to deal with desertification. The hardest hit regions of the country is the northern regions, and this phenomenon has largely contributed to the north-south migration. So if you have Kaya today, I mean, it's as a direct result of desertification in northern Ghana. If you are given the nod, what would you do to ensure that the UN Convention is fully implemented in our country to root out or at least control desertification in our country?
Mr. Chairman, again, the question even begs another question. It is not lost on anybody that desertification is a phenomenon which threatens our very livelihoods and even our very lives. And we were just talking about climate change and all. Desertification, if you take away the trees, that the flora, you generate carbon dioxide and you contribute to the CO2 in the atmosphere. So the question for combating desertification, we do not even need an international treaty to see for ourselves that it is something that we must do. Having said that, it means all the activities that generate potential desertification, we must attack them. And this one demands also intersectorial approach. Land use policy, agricultural lands, the sort of tree crops that we plant, the technology that we use to do tropical agriculture, all those things will have to be looked at, and the necessary policies and the necessary programs and the necessary technologies that will stop desertification will have to be looked at so that we can fight it. So yes, as a minister, I know that it is a big issue, and I happen to have toured the northern regions of this country. But I tell you, it is not even a phenomenon which is peculiar to the northern regions of this country. At the turn of the century, where I hail from, it was all forest land. Now they have been thinned out, so that, again, my favorite crop, I noticed that cocoa is migrating south. Bia East, the Bia districts, cocoa does not thrive well there. Now it's cashew, it does well there. So it's all, it's a spectrum which is coming south, down south. So we must fight and do the necessary ecological restitution in a very holistic way. And that's why we have to look at policies and programs, and then look at the various sectorial actors so that we can act in concert to stop this.
Okay, now leaders. Oh, okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, this is just an aside. Just going through preparing for this, I came across an article that lists you as one of the richest men in Ghana. I came across an article that listed you as one of the richest men in Ghana. And I wonder if you will want to make a comment on that. But my question relates to CSIR and the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. The CSIR, for example, I do know, seem to be running out of researchers and scientists due to either retirement or poor remuneration. And I'm sure it is agreed that after Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966, science, technology, and innovation seem to have gone down, especially as the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission was supposed to lead the way. I'm just thinking if you have thought about these two institutions and the role that they can play in STI. and what you intend to do, especially given the fact that these institutions seem to be running out of the necessary human resource that is required to drive whatever vision that led to their establishment as a result of either retirement or poor remuneration.
Mr. Chairman, again, another difficult area, because the determinants of this problem are many. It starts with training even in especially the secondary schools, because if you do not have a critical mass of numbers that will take the science-based subjects in the universities, who will then apply themselves in the applied science arena, where essentially DCSIR and GAEC are. Those are applied sciences. They have a base where they feed from, so to speak, feed from. So the problem should be looked at the scientific culture, and we have answered this previously, and I've given an affirmation that yes, we work with education so that we have that critical mass. I even went to give a ratio that in secondary institutions, the science to the humanities should be in the ratio of maybe 60-70% to 30%. And indeed, everybody should have even a science basic like the US system. I schooled a bit in the US, so that everybody has an appreciation of what is happening up to a certain level. And when we branch into those specialties, indeed in the universities, then the sciences, especially those critical areas that are needed, that's why you have to have an incentive mechanism, scholarships, to go into specific areas. Then, following that, you cited remuneration. If we put our value on it, and that we link them to industry, I'm sure their remuneration and the recompense for them will be up. And that is why we will retain. Because when even we train those people, it is not that people do not want to branch in those fields, but in fact they live further afield into especially the developed world where salaries are better. But at least we can make an effort. And it is the only way we can do that is to link them to the productive industries so that we can retain them.
Right. Landfill sites. I wish that could be my substantive question, but I'm sure it will come up. So let me go to controversial assessments that have been done of members of Parliament. One that was recently done by the University of Ghana, and another that was done by Odikro some time ago, did not capture you favorably by way of attendance to your duties as a member of Parliament. And that's why I refer to them as controversial reports, because I am aware of the controversy those reports generated. But both reports did not capture you favorably. Given the role and the task that you are expected to perform as Minister of Environment, what can you say about this past, research reports that did not show that commitment that is required of one who is representing a constituency in this House?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I wonder which report he is referring to, because in my first term I was a regional minister, and indeed, if you ask the majority leader, Honorable Oseche Mensah, I have an occasion that he had always praised me that I always made an effort to be in attendance. So I'm very, very, very amazed. That research, their methodology should be questioned, because indeed I I made sure that I had the right balance between visits to my constituency, the ministerial duties at the regional level. And remember, that was the time we were canvassing for a region, for the Western North. So those reports and the group, honestly, they are very unscientific. So honestly, I do not. But to answer you specifically, my ministerial duties and my attendance in Parliament, you want to place a bet? Me, I am one person who puts a lot of premium on my parliamentary because there is a history behind me. Nobody has suffered to become an MP more than me. So I don't joke with my MP duties, and everybody will attest to that. So I do not know where they got that thing from. I was given a specific duty to midwife a region into being Western North, where I came from. I tagged it with all the gusto that I could. So if I didn't get the balance right, vis-a-vis attendance, that should not be a yardstick for anybody to make projections.
Well, you can only know how much you have suffered. You cannot know how much others to have suffered. So to declare yourself as the one who has suffered the most is quite interesting. But finally, on landfill sites, I have one in my constituency that is very, very disturbing. I see the folks around Kula in my constituency, around the landfill site, sometimes trying to make a living, even as they face the dangers that are associated with spillage and other toxic materials that come from these landfill sites. The controversy has always been really under whose control are these landfill sites, local government ministry and or the sanitation ministry. Yet these are, these have effects on the environment and the people who live in those communities. I want to find out what your approach will be, as especially other countries have long moved away from these landfill sites as ways of disposing waste.
Mr. Chairman, I've given previous responses. A combination of technology, legislation, sociology. Let me explain. Landfill sites, we are saying we are moving away from it. Yes, it's tied into recycling. And the recycling agenda lies partly with us, EPA and others. So we will make sure that we up our game and get the capacity for recycling. Recently, when the president went around doing the campaign, you are sure that you heard of several places where recycling of waste material is going to be done to generate, fertilizers. In fact, waste material actually is a resource if well handled. So we'll look at that. But we are talking about capacity issues. We might not be able to do it in every place, and we are transitioning from landfills to recycling. In that, as far as that is concerned, it means whilst we are in transit, certain laws must be enforced. And I have served notice that after talking to even our own entities, the EPA should not shy away from sending entities, not individuals. Of course, individuals can be sent to court. But I want to see an example being made, and I mentioned a couple of them. Entities, yes, government agencies, we should collaborate first. But if there's a sure dereliction of duty and an entity is sent to court, I don't want to mention an example. The CEO of that entity, I'm sure, will fall, I'm sure, by even public suasion, will be forced to do what is needful. So we should say, I will not, I can consider that angle. But on the other hand, we believe that the way to go is recycling, really, so that we can make use of the waste and turn them into other things. Thank you.
Are you really worth $180 million? Are you really worth $180 million?
Well, I don't know where that thing is coming from. I don't know, Mr. Chairman. I refuse to. At least I have not been cited for public theft.
But what matters is that you are a very serious farmer. I'm hearing here that you cultivate nutmegs. When people import them from elsewhere, you cultivate them here. That's very commendable. Yes, Honorable Minister Nominee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a follow-up to the last response the nominee gave on landfill sites and recycling. Source separation of waste, separating our garbage at source to promote recycling. Is it something that you would consider promoting? Waste is also exported to other countries. Some Scandinavian countries actually import waste to feed their recycling industry. So if we manage this space properly, it could be a major import earner for Ghana. Would you look at source separation of waste and all that is required for it, legislation, public education and all that? Thank you.
Indeed, Mr. Chairman, two things that Honorable Esler also has had. Source separation, yes. Absolutely. We must separate the solids and the biodegradables from the non-degradable. But it's a cultural phenomenon. It's a cultural phenomenon. We have to do education so that it is embedded in the public polity. So it is something that we have to train people to imbibe and do. So the education will have to go in thing. And indeed, where I come from, for example, feeding ruminants, can you imagine, let me go even further. Plantain peels, if we buy from the markets and we buy what we are going to use today and maybe tomorrow, in the peeled form, and they are packaged for you, leave the peels behind in the markets, we can aggregate them, cut them into pieces and feed ruminants. We are going to gain. So this thing doesn't take exotic science to do this. So that's what I mean by sociology and culture. Some of these things are not even in science. So we can do that, madam. And then export of waste. Well, we have to look at it. Because if what we are saying is true, we may end up even being a net importer of waste even from our geographical region. Those countries who hopefully we have the capacity to generate energy, fertilizer and other things, products from waste. Then I can see Ghana importing from Cote d'Ivoire, Togo and others, waste. So, well, if in the interim we have to export because we don't have the capacity, we have to look at the economics of it and then give the necessary permits for that to be done. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would like the nominee to tell us what he will do to assist the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to strengthen its monitoring and evaluation and enforcement to follow up on whether the permits recipients are abiding by their conditions of their permits. I mean, people in the mining, telecommunications, forestry, oil and gas, and many other sectors need an EPA's permit to be able to conduct their activities. But after the permits are issued, what is done to monitor the implementation to ensure that they are actually being applied?
Mr. Chairman, the consequential question is, that place there is some echo problem there. You can't hear very well. What is done? What is being done? Please, can you help me?
What would you do to assist the Environmental Protection Agency to strengthen its monitoring and evaluation of the permits that it actually issued to those who apply for those permits, whether in telecommunications, mining, forestry, oil and gas sector, and to enforce the conditions of their own legislation. After the permits are issued, do they follow up to ensure that they are actually abiding by the terms of those permits? And what would you do to assist them to strengthen the mechanisms to enforce their own legislation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The permits have expiration dates. One of the issues is that some of them, once the permits are issued, let me admit that there's no follow-up, and even though we might have the data to see that they are renewed. Then the other problem is capacity issue in terms of human resource. The EPA is very, very thin on the ground in the regions and the districts. In fact, before I came here, naturally I contacted the heads of the various agencies, and one of the issues that came up was that they have a problem with recruiting staff into that area. So yes, we have to build their capacity so that they have the necessary skills even to inspect them, but also we have to put boots on the ground in terms of numbers at the operational level, because invariably these activities happen in the districts. So that is what I intend here.
Because if they do not monitor to see whether the entities are operating in accordance with the law, then it's as if they are operating only from their offices. And the mischief that this is intended to solve would still be perpetrated. Now, noise pollution is also environmental pollution, and it can even cause mental health challenges for us, particularly in these areas when people are locked down and can't have other activities to take their minds off the challenges that we're facing with COVID and all that. Our churches, mosques, nightclubs, bars in residential areas are the main sources of some of this noise pollution. What are you going to do to ensure that we minimize this scourge, which may even be affecting our health?
Mr. Chairman, noise pollution is a big and very difficult area. But that said, it doesn't mean we should not enforce the laws of the land. Because of our cultural settings, there's resistance from certain segments of society with regard to noise. So we will embark on massive public education as far as noise pollution is concerned. And in certain instances, give ultimatums and then enforce the law. I believe that as a physician, I know that, like she rightly pointed out, noise pollution is a very, very important problem in this country, but we do not appreciate it. So we should put in place systems that can even measure, because we have simple implements that can measure the number of decibels that we've gone over. But unless we have that capacity to, measure all those things, and I notice that we do not have a lot of them in place. So we have to get the law. The law is there, but consequential legislation will have to be reviewed, and then, more importantly, embark on massive education nationwide, so that we come to a point where people themselves will see the severity of the problem and be self-compliant. But then, in those instances where people are recalcitrant, we enforce the law.
My final question is, what are you going to do to promote science, technology, education and mathematics, engineering and mathematics
He has answered that question.
And training for girls? He's answered that.
He has answered that question.
For girls?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
On STEM. Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman,
I'm really constrained with time because it's time for Friday prayers.
I hope prayers start soon.
Yeah, I can see that you're also praying that it starts soon. So I may be grateful if the nominee will just take my questions and then I can run out, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. Hoping that you may ask the full house for me. I have a number of questions that relate to land encroachment with regards to CSR, that's Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Their lands across this country are really being encroached. And you've served as the Minister for Lands and Forestry before, so I'm sure you are very much familiar with this. And in some instances, they are finding it very difficult to get the Land Commission to assist them to hold on to their lease. That will help them to be able to protect this. What will you do to curb this? And second has to do with innovation. I mean, in an early answer to your question, here you try to explain. We all know the importance of innovation and research work, but the current funding mechanism, if it continues, then I'm sorry, very soon nobody will be interested in, working on any research work. What innovative measures will you put in place to ensure that there's some funding, dedicated funding, to support innovation in the development of our country? And Mr. Chairman, the last group of questions that I have has to do with GMO. That's the genetically modified food. I just want to know your position on it and what is your views on all the talk about GMO. Also, you know, SARI, that's Savannah Agricultural Research Institute, since 2012 have been researching into GMO cowpea, that in their work believe that it has the potential to curb the Maruca pest destruction. They have currently even applied to the National Biosafety Authority to enable them to release this crop into the general population. But unfortunately, the Minister for Agric, Food and Agriculture on 14th March 2019, when he met the development partners, had this to say that Ghana does not need GMO to ensure food sufficiency and security. What is your view on this? I know that Professor Frimpong Boateng, your predecessor, has presented before this House a regulation on biosafety. Whilst this is happening, unfortunately, you have the Minister of Agriculture has a different view. As a medical doctor yourself, and knowing very well that you've been in this area for long, can you say that GMOs are 100% safe for consumption, for which Ghana should allow them to pester, even though I know we've done the biosafety law already? And Mr. Chairman, lastly, as you proceed to the Ministry of Environment, if this House gives you the opportunity, will you encourage CSI to continue its push on more research on GMOs, possibly against the views of the like of the Minister for Agric? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope that probably, Mr. Chairman, you help me with the follow-ups if he answers, because I have to run to the work.
Chairman, he has to go for Friday prayers. I would have to stay with the Honorable Tampule. It means you're also going. Okay, I'm obliged to support Chairman, but whilst answering where is need for Chairman for me to come in on a follow-up, I will. And I trust that the leadership on this side will allow me also. I'm not late yet. If I take my questions, I still can join in the mocks, which is around 1:30, 1:35. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Nominee, you may take them one by one and be as short as possible.
Mr. Chairman, land encroachment. These are legal issues. We have to find out, I will have to find out what are the real issues. If we have to have recourse to the law, we will do that and take back the land. That's the answer. Funding for innovation, I think I've answered in several questions that and I even called for a decade of innovation and its antecedent funding from industry and users and the private sector, and how government should even set up a dedicated fund. So I've answered that. The GMO position, again, there are several issues in there, and to force the minister to take a position is not fair. I happen to know that the issues are not even about biosafety issues, but the ability to conserve your gene pool, the variation, because the potential to make us genetically dependent on outside sources, and it has implication even for our national security. These are the real issues, but it is not even the biological safety, so to speak, because a lot of GMOs are safe. They are safe. That as a scientist, I would say that it has been in the USA, they use a lot of genetically modified entities, and as far as I'm concerned, their mortalities are as simple. But inbuilt there is the safety and the economics, because some of them have patented some of these things, and if you become very reliant on them, it means your genetic pool, you lose them forever, and if there's a catastrophe, you cannot go back to those things that were native to your environment. Again, if some of these things should escape into the environment, they can actually replicate themselves and populate your nation and change the flora and fauna of your nation. So when there are experts out there, we have to listen to them and see what can be done. Now, having said that, there are several things, researches that have improved local varieties that they are sitting on shelves, which can give comparable results to GMO identified entities that we have not even used, that I have talked to before. And then he asked about SARI. He's not here, I've forgotten. Savannah.
Yes, Savannah Agricultural Research Institute.
He says, as it ran down, I forgot the question.
That they are undertaking some small studies. Will you encourage them and fund
as
them?
For the studies, they can take a permit from EPA, and if it's certified, there is always a committee on GMO. And if all the biosafety precautions are taken, studies are permitted.
So do you support them to undertake those studies?
Pardon?
Will you support them to undertake those studies?
That's what I'm saying, that the law even permits those studies to be done. As to their wide application, because before even you get a permit to do those studies, there is a committee, I've forgotten the official name of the committee, but there's always a local entity, committee of scientists who make sure that those entities will not escape into the environment and cause all the pictures that are pointed heretofore. But it doesn't mean that we cannot, at the research level, deal with GMOs. It is only when we want to deploy on commercial basis that we have a lot of issues there, and I've enumerated them. And then, that is all.
Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. He asked for your view on a particular matter on it.
On particular?
Your view on Council for Scientific and Industrial Research.
Yes. The land encroachment issue, I've said, and then it's applicable to the Kwabinya, what do you call it? Ghana Atomic Energy, GAEC 2. So there are land issues there. But we have to look at the law. I mean, the law is the law. So if people have encroached and we have to deal with them, then I will be advised.
Chairman, Minister Designate, your answer is specific. You've used Kwabinya. The Honorable Muntaka wanted to find out that across the country, there is unacceptable encroachment on all Council for Scientific and Industrial Research land. What will you do if you become minister to halt the unacceptable practice.
He has answered that one. That was what he answered first, yes. He said the legal matters, so he will look at the legal matters.
But Chairman, legal matters is not enough. You have your land, they are taking it. He should tell us what he will do to secure those lands.
Preventive one, those in account say the more the that one step we will take.
Now,
then those that are gone, we will go and retrieve them.
Translate it.
To which those that are lost, we will draw a perimeter around those that are not lost, so we secure them. And then those that have been taken, we will go and use the necessary legal instruments to retrieve them.
Yes.
I'll try and be brief. Look, come with me to environmental impact assessment. And a huge requirement, and you know it's a basic requirement for setting up a number of setups in this country. Now, in one of my theses, it came out clearly that the EPA often subcontracts the pursuit of environmental impact assessment to private hands. And then often it turns out that it compromised. What will you do under your leadership to ensure that we don't compromise the conduct of environmental impact assessment?
Mr. Chairman, these are moral issues, moral hazards. So we have to put in place a mechanism. Those private entities who do that, either personnel or organizations, off our books, and we do not deal with them. And then indeed, if there are avenues for sanctioning, we will take that recourse. But certainly, as a believer in the private sector collaboration, I don't think we have to, because of that reason, we have to not deal with the private sector. I decried the death of personnel, that we know how. Then, on the other hand, you cannot say in absolute certain terms that even the public personnel in the public service, they might be any better.
So, the carbon trade concept, which is hugely advocated globally, and developed countries have taken huge advantage, and in our parts of the world, we seem to be lacking behind because of capacity. What is your own assessment of our drive towards building our capacity to buy into the carbon trade concept and also rake in the necessary benefits to our country?
Well, the Carbon Trade Center has been beset with a lot of problems. I don't want to mention some countries' names, but I have been issued certain countries thought that it was the potential for a rip-off from the developed world to the developing world existed, and they were contesting some of the issues there and the assignments that had been made in terms of, values that have been put on certain activities. But that said, we also have a problem with tapping into that because of it's a highly technical issue. So I don't know what is happening in my ministry. If the technical impediments in terms of capacity to write or apply within the necessary format and whatnot, if we able to do that, then I'll look at it and then make sure that MESTI does it so that Ghana will be able to access the fund. But my understanding is that there are certain countries who do not, even as a matter of principle, agree to that arrangement. And I don't want to mention one big country that has been mentioned here before. But that said, the real issue, let me repeat, is that it's a highly technical area, and you need very, very technically competent people who are very conversant in the area, so that your paper will even, or submissions will even be accepted in the first place. That's the brief that I got. But when I get there, there will be other issues. So when I get there, we will have to look at it. And then I suspect our country might also be too keen to assess it for various reasons. Because you have to also come out with certain there are preconditions to attach to it. So it's a big problem.
Well, maybe we'll have the conversation in detail some other time. But my last question is related to e-waste. I'm aware Germans have been helping us. If you go to Abublushi now, there have been a number of interventions to get at top concerns about e-waste. I know you are also concerned and passionate about this. Do you have any predetermined programs or plans to deal with e-waste in our country?
Indeed, let me give credit to my predecessor. They are a very, very elaborate plans in Ministry now. Some of them, like I'm saying, might even need legislative backing. And the others, the programs will have, naturally everything evolves. So when I get there, I have to look at it. And then if there are any gaps there, and if there any level that I'll have to take it to, I'm certainly interested in that area, and we will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, thank you very much. The Honorable Member, what's the full name of your constituency? The constituency, how do you call it?
We also.
How many polling stations do you have?
168.
So is it true that a ballot box was burnt at coalition in the last elections?
Well, I heard reports that I was not a witness to that. Wasn't burnt, was snatched and destroyed. A mob went into it and they destroyed it.
Okay. So your collated resource was less that ballot box.
Pardon?
Your collated resource was less that ballot box.
No.
Okay. It's appreciated.
Yes.
I enjoy your depth intellectually, but Minister for Environment, the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission have major constraints, indeed financial constraints. They cannot even afford payment of subscription to SKA, and then they too, loss of their land are lost. They are also suffering problems of encroachment. This is captured in the handing over notes of your outgoing minister. What will you do to address these matters? Thank you.
Well, Ghana will have to honor its international obligations and agreements that have been entered to. So, yes, I read it from the news too. So I have to find the nature of the problem. And then negotiate with the Minister of Finance or whatever entity that funds are going to come from and pay up. We simply have no choice. We have to pay up. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you. I would lump it up. Plant Genetic Resources Research Institute, Bunsu, Savannah Agricultural Research Institute, Sale, Nyankpala, Soil Research Institute, Kwada Sukumasi, Water Research Institute, Accra. And then they all generally have problems with staffing. What will you do about it so that they are efficient in the delivery of the research which they undertake? Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't hear that they are having problem with staffing.
Yes. Experienced and skilled staff. for those research institutes, as I mentioned.
So, Chairman, I believe this question has been asked in a global way, albeit in a global way before. We're losing a lot of researchers, and I've said that we have to link those institutes to industry so that their IGF could be up, and some arrangements should be made so that their salaries and other remunerations could be competitive to their peers elsewhere. Now, of course, I also have to appeal to my government, if we are going to make science and technology and innovation the fulcrum under which Ghana's socio-economic development revolves, that we put a premium on those people, and their experience and whatnot should also count. I noticed that the Minister for Labour, I listened to that, he was calling for extension of what do you call it, the retirement age. Those things must also be factored in so that because we are living longer, and I don't want to veer into his space, but if they must make a case for it, these are the people that we need, so that they do not go, so to speak, on premature retirement, and they have the opportunity to earn extra income.
Chairman, for instance, I'm referring to handing over notes, the CSIR, in page 70 of it, is currently operating with a staff strength of 2,728, which is woefully inadequate to choose their wares. And that despite technical clearance granted in 2019, some 158 staff were recruited, but they still think that they've lost a number of staff to retirement. Will you replace and make sure they have their full complement of staff? Thank you, Chair.
Indeed so, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I also see, and it's unfortunate that Ghana is yet to take advantage of it, oil palm kernel. You hear everybody talk about Malaysia, the Malaysia miracle, and they are doing well. What are we doing, and what will you do as minister to ensure that we export this in large quantities? Thank you. Based on improved research and improved quality production of those products.
Mr. Chairman, indeed, Ghana is importing oil palm products. And so our capacity is very constrained. But like the Honorable Committee Vice Chair, so to speak, asked, we still have capacity to make up on those deficits. And that is through improved varieties. A lot of farmers are not planting improved varieties. So the potential is there. But this one, I have to collaborate with the Minister for Agric and other entities so that this thing can be fashioned out and rolled out.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, FARA, is headquartered in Accra by some agreements signed in October 2003, specifically October 14. The government of Ghana signed an agreement with your ministry. Has that agreement been ratified by Parliament in accordance with Article 75 of the 1992 Constitution?
Mr. Chairman, I cannot recall. There are so many activities in the legal program.
Should you get to the ministry?
So I'll have to find out. If I have not, then of course I will.
Should you get to the ministry and it's not been ratified, when should we expect you referring it to Parliament for ratification?
After doing all the necessary checks and what, I should believe that within the next...
So even if the necessary work takes you 2, 3, 4 years, we should be waiting for you. I need certainty of time because it's been signed. The headquarters is here. They are helping the country with their work and their research. Give me a date that you will come to Parliament for us to do what is constitutionally needful.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that we are, as I sit here, that's why I say I don't know its status. But I'm asking myself, why has it not come? There surely must be some problem, and I intend finding out. But barring every constraint, I believe that when we look at the way things work in our country, within 90 days, it should be able to come here.
But you know that the president is sending you there to solve problems, not to go and know the problems, but to solve them. So that's why I want a definite response from you. Will you solve the problem and get the agreement ratified? Then, after all, what will be the legal basis of us engaging in that relationship?
I believe I've given a response. I believe that an intelligent girl should be within 3 months.
Now, to the Honorable Ablakwa referred you to the United Nations Climate Decision, UN General Assembly 2019, and you know that because of the past US President politics, which was not based on multilateralism, the US as a major player took some unilateral decisions, which I heard you say that President Barney has promised to do. The commitment by developing countries, including Ghana, are we not just a consequence of their actions? And what will you do so that we become a major player? I mean, we talk about the matter of carbon emission. Do you have an idea how much Ghana contributes to that?
Carbon emission. Well, as a percentage of in the global standard, I don't think we contribute much. I used to have a figure in my head, honestly, but I do not want to put a figure that I can also substantiate it. But I saw 40-something million cubic.
As Chairman, the President was so determined to fight illegal mining, popularly referred to as galamsey. There was Operation Vanguard, which in my view was legal. There was your ministry also taking another group referred to as Operation Halt, which was working with the Forestry Commission. The other one, the Minister for Interior and the Minister for Defense. When you assume office as minister, will you rationalize and make sure that we have unity of focus in the fight against galamsey? If we need to deploy the security agencies, you will not be working at cross purposes with your counterparts as defense and interior.
Indeed so, Mr. Chairman. And as far as I'm concerned, some of these entities have been withdrawn. So we have a clean sheet to which to start.
Now, the Environmental Protection Agency of your ministry, they need also staffing support, they need technical support for capacity. But the Ghanaian community or various communities in Ghana are complaining about 2 electromagnetic effects. One with telecom towers and its siting, and the consequence of lack of public education for them to appreciate how that impacts on their life. The second is fuel stations. You just have a community, then all you see is a fuel station coming out in a neighborhood that they get frustrated and they don't get what you call institutional support that supports the protection of their lives. What will you do about it?
Mr. Chairman, the electromagnetic phenomena, I understand the scientific community, there is maybe not a consensus on the damage that is done to the human person and to a living organism. That said, as a doctor, I will err on the side of safety. That EPA will have to conduct a scientific study, the Ghanaian situation, and come with recommendations. I understand steps have been taken in that direction. I don't know what stage they are now. I think it is being done by Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. Fuel stations, the story with fuel stations is a bit difficult. Some have built in built-up areas. The others too who set up, and then the community or the built-up area, so to speak, also got to them in the sense that there are specific distances that they should keep away. I'm not sure, even is there regard to, when you talk of fuel stations, the law with regard to petrol stations is a bit different from the gas stations. So we have to disaggregate the two. My understanding is that the fuel stations can be closer to communities than some. That's the gas, petrol, and diesel stations. The liquid gas can be closer to communities than we care to. Apart from public places like churches, mosques, schools, where you cannot build petrol stations. Indeed, the law is that if you are a private entity and you are living close to, even sharing a wall with petrol stations, it's not against the law. That's one thing I found out. If we have to change it, we have to change the law. Now, with regard to gas stations, there's a definite distance that it must be away from all built-up areas. That one, I forgot the absolute distance, but I can find out. That much I know. But again, what came first? Some people obey the law and build their gas stations far away from built-up areas. And yet it is rather the built-up areas which encroach and got near to the gas stations, and yet they cry foul. So the narrative is not as simple as people make them out to be.
Chairman, the Minister, you are given one side of the narrative. I agree with you on that leg. But there is another narrative where homes are invaded or the EPA issues are licenses, and what those siting up the fuel and gas station is to hold the EPA license and say that we've been authorized to be here, but the community is saying that we have not been engaged sufficiently, or we do not agree with EPA going ahead with this activity. What will you do about that?
Mr. Chairman, that's why I'm saying that with regard to diesel and petrol, look at the law. If they can be permitted to build right to homes, but schools, mosques, so if the law is bad, we can change it. So they can cry foul, and I sympathize with them, but sympathy is different from law. Then, but when you're talking about gas stations, that is another kettle, and I think I've explained already.
Chairman, I love eating sweet potatoes, and in Ghana, we don't even encourage its eating. Chairman had a bite of it this morning. I see as part of the research, very different types of research going into expanded production of it. It is something that we easily can export to improve our foreign exchange regime, and it's something we can encourage its eating even in our domestic economy. What will you do to give meaning to the research findings on sweet potatoes in Ghana?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I believe that we have to collaborate with the Ministry of Agri. That is where Mercy and Agri should put their money. The sweet potato is very nutritious, contains protein content compared to pure flour. And we should do our advertisement and promote consumption of that. In fact, we can incorporate it into flour in a certain ratio so that we can make it into bread. But we have to train our taste buds to get used to it so that people will patronize them. Even before we talk about export, yes, the export potential too is there. So I agree with you entirely, and that is where we can even improve farmers' incomes and help them out of poverty.
Chairman, my final question to the Minister is, Ghana now has the advantage of producing oil and gas. Is there an environmental policy relating to oil and gas resources, its exploitation in our country, and what will you do if you become Minister for Environment on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, indeed there is a policy, I've cited a draft policy in various stages of development. I forget which stage it has reached. So that would be one of my duties, to make sure that it comes, we get the necessary things done and it comes to Parliament as soon as possible if legislation is needed, so that we can deploy. It's long overdue.
Will your ministry conduct some need study? Solar, I know, is largely driven by policy by the Ministry of Energy in Ghana, but you are responsible for the environment. If you take from Navrungo, coming through Bolga, through Nasia, Savlogo to Tamale, as you have traveled extensively abroad, whether you are in Germany or you are in Switzerland, you see those solar things which uses like an electric fan. I don't know the technical meaning for it. My view will be that we should begin developing that kind of environmental friendly infrastructure to support the solar regime in Ghana. Can you give me an assurance, Minister Designate?
Ghana being in the tropical world, the potential for solar energy is huge. The only problem is the economics of it and the economics of it. Well, how they deployed solar panels in Germany might be acceptable there. We should have a national dialogue. Whichever configuration is able to harvest the energy, that is our primary concern. Whether rooftops, whether we put in them on our garages, whether on standalone entities, whether in farms where we can even do, because some certain plants even need shading, and when they are well spaced, you can even harvest them, especially in rural electrification settings. That one, we have to have a conversation and dialogue and a closure on that.
Chairman, thank you, and I wish the nominee well.
Honorable nominee, well, I only wish to put this on record that your life is a reflection of somebody who is prepared to acquire the knowledge, dirty your hands to achieve results. I wish you well in this new enterprise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank all members. I appreciate what has happened today. I'm so grateful.
You're discharged. You hear from us.
I hear that the funds I spoke about is called wind veins. Thank you.